So, you think you're ready to explore ancient Greece, the land of gods and philosophers and warriors and Homer and gladiators fighting in colosseums and all that? Alright then, strap on some sandals and a toga you don't want to sit down in with open legs, and let's slum it out through some of the shadiest neighborhoods that ancient Greece had to offer. Forget any idyllic visions of marble temples and olive groves. Instead, we're diving into the dark underbelly of a civilization that gave us both democracy and a horrible inequality that created some of the sketchiest areas history has to offer. Let's get a lay of the land first. Ancient Greece was much more than just Athens and Sparta. It was a collection of city-states, and each had its own things going on. You had Athens and all of its aura for sure, but there was also the massively fortified city of Thebes, the maritime power of Corinth, and its distinct architecture, and Syracuse way out on the modern-day island of Sicily. Each city-state or polis was like its own little country, complete with its own government, customs, and areas that were both revered and feared. You had your powerful cities like Athens, which was the heart of learning and philosophy, and Sparta, known for its military might and no-nonsense lifestyle. Then there were smaller but equally intriguing places like Corinth, famous for its commerce and, hospitality, and Thebes, a city that seemed to always find itself in the middle of some political drama. But let's not be too cynical. There was some pretty swanky areas in ancient Greece. In Athens, for example, the district around Acropolis was built up with elite residences. This was basically the Beverly Hills of ancient Greece, a place where philosophers like Socrates might have sat down with statesmen like Pericles and talked about the nature of existence. There were wide streets, beautiful gardens, and crazy nice architecture. People here had money, influence, and probably more importantly, private security, though they called them servants back then. The Plaka was another wealthy spot in Athens. It was known for its scenic views and a marketplace stocked with vendors coming from all over. It was a place where artists and intellectuals gathered, and you might catch a glimpse of Sophocles himself pondering his next tragic masterpiece while sipping on watered-down wine. In Corinth, the area around the Temple of Apollo was considered pretty posh. This was where the wealthier merchants lived, the kind of people who made their fortune trading olive oil and wine. These areas were pretty clean, relatively safe, and home to some of the best symposia, which were basically the ancient Greek version of a cocktail party. The discussions at these symposia were lively, the wine flowed freely, and the men gossiped like the Kardashians. But let's get to the juicy part, the bad neighborhoods. Every city had them. In Athens, if you took a wrong turn from the Agora, you might find yourself in the district of Kerameikos. This was the city's pottery quarter by day, but by night it transformed into a labyrinth of shady dealings with sketchy characters. This transformation was largely because it also hosted Athens' largest cemetery, which, coupled by its pottery kilns and industrial atmosphere, lent it a somewhat eerie and unwelcoming aura after dark. The mix of the industrial and the funereal, the transit natures of the trades conducted there, and the presence of tombs made Kerameikos an area frequented by those on the margins of society, from gravediggers and potters to possibly thieves and other characters looking to take advantage of the less policed, darker stretches of the district. The metics, or resident aliens, often lived in less developed parts of the city, and they had a tough go of it. Metics, or metiki in ancient Greek, were foreign residents in a city-state who weren't granted full citizen rights because of their non-native status. They contributed to the economy in many ways, but they also got a bunch of discrimination thrown at them because of their outsider status. They were barred from owning land and participating in politics, often relegated to shadier districts. Metics were indispensable to the Athenian economy in several ways. They often had professions and trades that no other citizen wanted, like sanitation and other hard/smelly labor jobs. But many metics were also skilled artisans and craftsmen and merchants. Their role was very important in trade and commerce, fundamental to Athens' prosperity as a major trading hub. Metics could also be involved in industries like pottery, crucial for both domestic use and export, and shipbuilding, which were vital for Athens' naval dominance. Still though, metics often lived in less affluent parts of the city. These areas were less desirable for a couple of reasons. You had the double whammy of bad infrastructure and housing that led to more crime and social unrest. The dense, less regulated environments of these neighborhoods could be breeding grounds for tension and conflict. Then there was the Piraeus, the bustling port of Athens. Sure, it was vibrant and full of life and essential for trade, but it was also crawling with sailors, pickpockets, and con artists. Think of it as the Vegas Strip without the neon lights and with a lot more stray dogs. It was a place where fortunes were made and lost over a cup of kikeon, a sort of ancient Greek brew that was as potent as it was mysterious. Corinth had its own den of iniquity, Acrocorinth, a citadel overlooking the city. It was infamous for its temple of Aphrodite, which supposedly housed 1,000 temple prostitutes. It attracted the kind of clientele who enjoyed the seedier side of life and were not too concerned about the difference between a drachma and a silver obol, if you know what I mean. You don't? It was said that in Corinth, wealth could buy anything, and many a merchant found himself lured into the web of hedonistic charms. Thebes, not to be outdone, had the infamous Cadmea. This citadel was often a political hotspot, and not always in a good way. It was the site of many a coup and conspiracy where you'd be wise to keep your head down and your mouth shut, unless you felt like an impromptu stay in a dungeon. So, you're still visiting ancient Greece, huh? Well, if that's the case, here are some survival tips to make sure you make it back to your own time without being mugged or swindled or worse. Ancient Greek brothels were called porneia, which is, the origin of those internet websites that you definitely don't use. They were hotspots for all kinds of unsavory things. A bit of gambling, a bit of illegal trading, and a bit of espionage, in addition to the porneia. If you find yourself in one, which is definitely because you got lost and definitely not because you were looking for it, then you might want to keep your head on a swivel. The brothels around ancient Greece were usually run by some pretty unsavory characters. They were called pornoboskos, the Greek word for pimps. These pimps were actually listed in Greek texts right alongside the people with jobs like innkeeper, cook, and tax collector. In Athens, these porneia were located in the red light districts of Piraeus and Kerameikos. Here, you could find narrow, dirty alleyways with women walking around with sandals that had "Follow Me" imprinted on their soles, inviting potential clients towards their place of business. And unlike many places today, it was all completely above board. A guy named Solon, who was considered one of the founders of Athenian democracy, made public brothels legal so he could manage public health and tax them. He built a temple dedicated to Aphrodite with money almost exclusively from brothel taxes. In ancient Greece, talking to the wrong person could land you in some trouble. Take barbers, for example. They weren't just your average hair cutters. Ancient Greek barbershops were the rumor mills of the city. Talking too much could quickly make you the center of unwanted attention, especially if you accidentally insulted the local crime lord while discussing last night's symposium. Doctors could also be a risky group to talk freely with. They double as early pharmacists and apothecaries, and had an extensive knowledge of herbs and potions that could heal you, but also that could kill you. Asking the wrong questions or showing too much interest in what they were cooking up might lead to misunderstandings, especially if they suspected you of trying to peddle your own questionable remedies. The market traders could also be a slippery bunch. Haggling was a fine art in ancient Greece, but some traders were better at turning a phrase than an honest profit. Before you know it, you'd be walking away with a suspiciously light money pouch and a clay vase that definitely belonged to Homer himself. If you're planning to explore the rougher parts of town, or if you just want to look important, consider hiring a somatophylax, or a bodyguard. These were often retired soldiers or gladiators, men who knew how to handle themselves in a fight. But choose wisely. Some were known to be in a league with the very thugs they were supposed to protect you from. Now, hiring a bodyguard wasn't just for safety, it was also a status symbol. Walking through the agora with a burly somatophylax in tow was the ancient equivalent of rolling up in a luxury chariot. Just be prepared to pay a hefty fee, and maybe a little extra under the table to keep your guard from switching sides at the first sign of trouble. The somatophylaces were more than just muscle, they were also great at observing and negotiating. A good bodyguard could defuse a situation before it turned ugly, and do it with simply a stern look or a couple of choice words. It was often a good move to have someone who could navigate the mean streets of Athens, where social class and overthinking basically made life a gauntlet. But then also be aware of the false somatophylax, which was a common scam in cities like Corinth. These guys would often pose as protectors but then vanish at the first sign of danger, or worse, lead you directly into a trap. Always ask for references and remember you get what you pay for. Ancient Greece was a land of contradictions. It was a place where democracy flourished alongside slavery, where the pursuit of wisdom coexisted with the love of a good brawl. Its neighborhoods reflected this duality, offering both the heights of cultural achievement and the depths of human vice. So if you're planning a time-traveling escapade to this fascinating world, remember to keep your wits about you and your valuables hidden, whether those valuables are physical or monetary. And who knows, you might just survive long enough to enjoy a nice jug of wine while watching a tragedy in the Dionysian theater. Just make sure your somatophylax is keeping an eye on the exits.